Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again for our weekly Native Strong Town Hall. Thanks for welcoming me back. I got to take a nice week off last week, and thank you again for Katie for subbing in and kind of running the show, or getting us all, sharing it out to the world and to our community, so the show could go on, as they say. As per usual, if you've come with us or hung out with us before on a week-to-week basis, excuse me, had the town hall playing in my ear on another screen. Sorry. So anyway, if you've joined us here before via Zoom, you can jump in on the bottom of your screen. There's a little chat bubble. It should pop up if you hover your cursor around there. There you can enter a question. If something pops in your head, just enter it as we're moving along here. Also, it will be streaming via Facebook. If you are joining us via Facebook, you can just drop a comment in there, and we'll be moderating those as we move forward. We will answer the questions at the end, so stick around so you can kind of hear what what those questions are that you may have or that may have popped up since last week. Without further ado, I'm going to bring in Mark Denning, our lovely moderator, our friend Mark Denning from the community, bringing his voice, and as well our featured speaker, Dr. Lyle Ignace, will join us shortly. Thank you again for joining us.
Boju and we Maganaduk, Naraway Benazi, Indigenous cause, Namando them, Anishinaabe and Dao, Neopid and Donjaba. And when I say that word Anishinaabe, I'm meaning in its largest sense, which is encompassing all of my background of 6 different tribes, 2 nations of Europe, all those things that make me me. So those of you that are watching, I had some input about why is it you only say Anishinaabe? So well, in that context of that language, it's all of that is what I'm meaning. So again, thank you for joining us, all of you that are with us, and please be mindful that we have the privilege and we have an ability to join a program like this online. Not a lot of our relatives do. So we need to represent their questions and their opinions. And sometimes we know our relatives really well and we can think, oh, I bet they would ask this question. Maybe I could get some clarification on it. So please ask the question. It's been an honor, and it continues to be and will continue to be an honor to be a part of this program. I think we're on our 50-something show. I don't know how many fingers. 50 looks like 7 weeks together doing this together. And that's quite something. And every week it's something different, a new challenge, a new way of looking at things. And we're always getting new information. I'm going to take a break from the COVID-19 note for just a moment. And please remind everyone in your circle that April and May are very, very big months for people who have suicide ideation. This is a time of year when it's quite prevalent. And so in recognition of the month and knowing that there's Native programs out there throughout the Indian health system that do this hat was made for me by Ho Chunk, Indian Health, much appreciated, hand done. And it says prevent suicide, and right on there you can see the best word of all for someone that may need it. And it's hold on, pain ends. There is help, there is hope. Always believe in yourself, you matter, never give up, stay strong. Dr. Ignace, that's what it says. Stay strong. A shout out to our Native Strong program. It was really awesome to see that. These are just general white hats that you can get at a lot of stores. And if you kind of doing homeschooling or maybe looking for an activity with your kid, with some guidance, of course, you can make this kind of stuff with a message to it and create some conversations that need to happen around our health, conversations that need to happen around our health, like COVID-19. We're getting vaccinations. Personally, that feels liberating. It feels good for those of us that got the 1 shot, the 2 shots. We're into that place where we should be okay. But there's plenty of people that aren't in that place. There's plenty of people that don't trust the science, that don't trust vaccination. and we're related to them, and we need to continue to have conversations. We must not give up on the people that push back against something that can help our elders, help ourselves, and help the fragile people in our life. So I'm going to end my commercial message right there, because I do have this privilege for me to begin the program, and I'm glad you're here. And for those of you joining us on tape, I'm glad you're watching, because we need to be especially vigilant as these gates that we've had up against COVID-19 begin to open a little bit, and mistakes can happen at any time. So Dr. Ignace is going to turn this one over to you. Looking forward, hoping there's some good news in your numbers, and please ask those questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, absolutely important. April and May, critical times for awareness, and I want to thank you for bringing that up. Jeremiah, good to see you back, back in the saddle. And so every week I've been presenting, and it's always, as Mark says, a little twist of new information. Some new, some kind of enhanced and new light brought to situations that maybe not everyone knows, but at least engage people into thought as to how to really look at numbers, how to look at trends, how to look at where do I fit in all of this monstrosity of a pandemic. A little twist on this week. I'm going to expand, look at kind of a worldly look at things and what's going on. And I want to first start with what's going on with our vaccines. So we all know about Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson has been in the news. What's highlighted are kind of new points that I want to bring up, because it seems like almost every other day, new information is coming out that kind of helps piece in the puzzles of questions that we've all had, and brings light to some clarity as to how we should be looking at these vaccines. And so right now, Pfizer, and we'll start from the top and go down. At the top, you see Pfizer and Moderna, months of RCT. That's clinical trial, real clinical trial, randomized clinical trial information. And now we have 6 months of data on Pfizer and Moderna. And what's important about this is, the question of how long do these vaccines actually last? Now, individuals have been, who went through the early enrollment, have been ongoing following, just because they were part of the trial. Initially, they don't get lost to follow-up. So this information is coming from these individuals, and after 6 months, it's still very clear that the vaccines continue to provide protective immune antibodies after 6 months. I know in the beginning people thought it would only last 3 months, 6 months. I think the longer we go out, we'll realize that these vaccines will last close to probably 12 months, if not 18 months. And it really sets us up for how we look at the future. Annually we get flu vaccines based on the prior year's strain of flu. We can't predict what's going to happen 2 years from now, but at least we know the framework, and we just have to, not us, me, like us regular people, but scientists, researchers, virologists, immunologists, they are predicting what will the most likely strain be the next year, 18 months from now. And so this technology and messenger RNA allows us to really change in a heartbeat the direction of how we provide vaccines. Before, it would take us a year to 18 months to create a new vaccine. Now it really takes us about 6 months. And that's huge. That's a huge game changer, because we're seeing this play out in real time, from the original virus to now. Now the predominant discussion now is about variants. And there are plenty of variants out there, but the most predominant ones that we hear about early on was the B117, and that was the UK variant. And then we heard about the 351, the South African, the P1 Brazilian. In the last couple months, it's been the California variant. We've heard about the New York variant, and now most recently in the news, the India double mutant variant. And so the information that I'm receiving is that Pfizer and Moderna are still very effective against the more common variants that we know of. So that's the UK, South African, Brazilian, even the California, as well as the New York. What we don't know, what is occurring now overseas in the Middle East with India, is this new variant that is coming, that is running rampant through the country. It's too early. We don't have information on there. Plus the data that we do get out of India is very limited. And so there's just not enough information to make that kind of determination. So now the flip side to this, with the use of the mRNA technology, is that Pfizer and Moderna can rapidly turn around and make a booster, create a booster to any type of new variant. Now, what we're finding out is that these variants, these mutations in the spike protein, they're not static. And what I mean by that is that it keeps moving. Mutations, the longer a virus remains in a community, the more the probability of a mutation and a variation of the original virus becomes more and more likely. And so, and that's what we're seeing throughout the country, not only the United States, but throughout the entire world, is that these variants are developing. So Pfizer and Moderna are creating boosters. Boosters by Pfizer, at least right now, is the B117. Moderna is looking at the B1351, the South African variant. Now, this may all change again in a matter of months, depending on which variant becomes the most predominant in the country, in the US, or even in the world. So both of those companies are looking at creating those boosters. And these boosters will more than likely be ready to go October, November. What's interesting is Moderna, I've talked about this before, the annual flu season typically starts about October and runs through March, 6 months, October to March. What Moderna is looking to do is combine their booster with the annual flu shot. So rather than getting 2 separate shots, you'll get 1 shot with the combo of the flu and their new booster to the variant. So that'll be interesting if they're able to create that into a single shot, which would be nice rather than getting 2. But nevertheless, this is what this technology allows to happen. And this is going to be revolutionary how we look at vaccines moving forward. Pediatrics is getting into the news now with both these companies. They are now enrolling individuals 6 months to 11 years old and determining the safety and efficacy of vaccinating individuals at a much younger age. So that information will more than likely come out probably about September. And if that's the case, they will be looking at probably another rapid turnaround with emergency use authorization with the FDA. And we're off to the races again with vaccinating our pediatric and adolescents. So the 12 to 15, 12 to 17-year-old age groups for Moderna and Pfizer are showing the effectiveness of their vaccines to be actually quite high. Not absolute, but pretty close to being 100% effective in prevention in 12 to 17 years of age. That's why both companies have lowered their threshold to evaluate even younger people that are 6 months of age. So this is really exciting stuff, and it's going to change. So once we thought that everyone was going to be vaccinated, 16 and 18 years of age and older, now we can look at the entire population. And so this is going to be pretty nice development if they're able to create this before the end of the year. I know the CDC has come out with a couple of different things, and certainly guidance and recommendations on vaccines in women who are pregnant or are thinking about being pregnant and viewing that as being safe now, and and providing recommendations to vaccinate women who are of childbearing age and who are currently pregnant, that it would be safe, that it is safe to vaccinate. So the other thing I wanted to bring up, this is kind of an interesting illustration with the CDC and its current recommendations for outdoor as a vaccinated person versus an unvaccinated person, the kinds of do's and don'ts. So getting vaccinated is important. We know studies are coming out now that have clearly show that it prevents not only infection, but also dramatically reduces the transmission of the virus. So much of the outdoor activities that we're currently doing have been kind of officially approved for vaccinated individuals. What I find interesting is for people that are unvaccinated, any small gathering outdoors, intermixing with people who either are vaccinated or unvaccinated, the CDC is actually recommending that people wear a mask. Now, I find this a little interesting because there's not much difference between when you get vaccinated and not get vaccinated, who wears a mask and who doesn't. So if you look at the four on the left-hand side, you look 4 rows down, you see dine at an outdoor restaurant with friends with multiple households. So if you're vaccinated, it's okay not to wear a mask, but it's less safe for an unvaccinated person. So they recommend that people wear a mask. That's kind of interesting because everything else, every other activity outdoors is recommended for even vaccinated people to wear a mask. So I think it's a little bit confusing as to say who can, who can't, even if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. They're really looking at the social distancing and crowding of outdoor events. And you can take this into consideration like a concert or a parade or a sports event. We already see that right now where stadiums, let's say stadiums outdoors, like I almost called it county stadium, American Family insurance field for the Milwaukee Brewers, they're at a capacity of 25%. Yet they have an outdoor capability, but you're still required to wear a mask. So there's kind of fine lines here. Indoor activities, any kind of gathering, indoor activity, movie theaters, churches, indoor choir, indoor restaurants, indoor exercise classes, whether you're vaccinated or not. They are looking at everyone wear a mask. And so there are benefits, of course, and we know that the vaccines are effective. They do reduce transmission. And so I feel that people who are fully vaccinated are allowed to have more liberties in their mask wearing effort. As I mentioned, variants are a big concern. Here in Wisconsin, they've undertaken random sampling and sequencing of positive COVID tests. And on the top part, you see the kind of the breakout of the variants that have been identified here in Wisconsin. We see the B117 as being the most prominent, almost double the second most common, and that being the California variant, followed by the South African and then the Brazilian. So when we look at regions in the state of Wisconsin, we see the Fox Valley, North Central, and Western parts are predominantly the B117. With the California variant, we see the Northeast, Northwest, Southeast portion. I have outlined those as being on the right-hand side. But when you look at in totality as to the variants, so as of right now, about 90% of all COVIDs are of the original strain. 10% are showing up as the variant strain. And of the variants, the predominant one is the B117. So you can see why, let's say, Pfizer may be targeting their booster to be more specific to the B117, mainly because that is the predominant variant that is showing up, not just here in Wisconsin, but here in the United States and really throughout the country. So this kind of leads into what's going on in India. So India has a population of almost 1.4 billion people. And I've been talking about India for about 3 weeks now, and really mentioning the escalation, the acceleration of COVID occurring in that country. And they're almost close to 400,000 cases in a day. Now, just to put that in context, for almost 400 patients a day in India, here in the United States, it would take us 7 days. It would literally take us 7 days, maybe 8 days to get to 400,000. So what they're doing in a day, we show the equivalence in a week. And what's really amazing about that is that here in the United States, we only breached 300,000 twice. They've done it now every day for the past 8 days, and there's no slowing of this going on. It may be close to 400,000 today, but I suspect that tomorrow will be even more. They may run out of testing too. So if you can imagine 400,000, that's not just testing, of yesterday, because we know how testing occurs. Depending on the facility and the areas and the testing sites and being able to get it from test, swab to a lab and then run it, if they're running 24 hours a day, they would have to have a lot of units to be able to run such a high volume of tests. So what we actually may be reporting out and seeing today may actually been the result of what was occurring last week, because they're so far behind. And if testing is continuing to go up, that means a 1 week lag in diagnosing whether you do or don't. These numbers are going to go up, and we should see these numbers go up for another week, depending on how they break this cycle. So it's really important to kind of put these in perspective, because what's happening in India, as we all are hearing, is really scary stuff. And India, the entire country, imagine 1.4 billion people, there's a general fear across the entire country. And I think every country adjacent to that is really scared as well as to, is this going to move into their region, into the entire European area, as well as here in the United States. And so, this isn't just a country problem. This is a world problem. And the impact is going to be felt across the board, because we know we have travel back and forth, whether it may be from India directly or India to Europe and Europe to here. Believe me, this variant that is showing up in India is more than likely going to be showing up here. And I would say, if not already, it will be. So, the question now is what's driving this? Is it just COVID, the original COVID virus? Yeah, that's probably true. But because there's so little information being gathered coming out of India, the general sense is that the B117, the UK variant, is playing a predominant role in this. But there are others who are on the ground, first line providers and researchers on the ground, feel that this variant, the B1617, that's the India variant, is also playing a major role in as well. And what's interesting about this is that no one really knows for sure. The evidence is just not clear yet, but there are things that are being defined as kind of mitigating factors here, why this is even occurring in the first place. Now, I had shown a slide before that this is really India's second wave. They had a pretty good run of low numbers, but what really allowed this to happen, so to speak, what kind of left the door wide open for this to take off, was that the health system wasn't prepared. The vaccine rollout was slow to bad. There were a lot of social gatherings that were occurring, whether it be weddings, concerts, sports, but people failed to mention one other major event that occurred, and that was the Hindu pilgrimage festivals that were occurring as well. And this is where massive numbers of people would go on their pilgrimage, and right around Easter, where hundreds of thousands of people would go on these journeys. That's kind of failed to mention as part of these social gatherings. I know it's probably implied, but it's not stated. So that was also a big variant as a vector of transmission. And then obviously the variants, the characteristics of these variants of transmission as being more contagious. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about kind of these factors is the vaccine that India was using also was AstraZeneca. Now, we know that Pfizer and Moderna have proven to be the most effective group of vaccines, not only in the prevention of infection, but also the transmission of infection. So, not to say AstraZeneca is not beneficial, it is, but it just doesn't have the same effective profile as Pfizer and Moderna have. So, and on top of that, less than 2% of the country is actually fully vaccinated. So they're really at these early beginning stages. We're well far advanced than India is in its vaccination program, but only 2% doesn't lend itself to a lot of confidence that this is being rolled out effectively in vast numbers to even make a dent in slowing this infection in the country. So my point being is that, you know, we other countries in Europe, in South America, they have their vaccine campaigns and they're rolling out. But when we get to countries that have fully implemented their vaccine program, such as Israel and the United Kingdom, you know, they've reached their herd immunity levels. Now, granted, they're much smaller countries and they could do this more quickly, but they went all in on this, on vaccinating their countries, their individuals. And as a result, they've reached that herd immunity point where you can really bend the curve on the viruses actually infecting individuals in a community setting. So Israel right now, you know, with almost 9 million people, they're reporting out less than 100 cases a day of COVID. And that's pretty remarkable. I mean, that's amazing that this is even occurring. And the United Kingdom, which is 68 million people, that would be the equivalent of, you know, let's say California and Florida combined in population, where we know here in the United States that accounts for probably 45,000 cases a day. Well, UK went all in with the vaccine, 68 million people, and they're reporting out less than 2,400 cases a day. So again, two countries who've fully bought in and who've rapidly vaccinated their population are now showing the benefits of not only why you do this, why you vaccinate, but also on the flip side of infections and their ability to have more openness in terms of normal, you know, pre-pandemic activity. So they're going to be at more liberty to be able to do this because they've reached that herd immunity. Now, I want to pull this back, and because this is, you know, about natives, but in looking specifically at the construct of what's occurring here in Wisconsin, we see that 42.5% of the population has received at least a single dose. Now, what I do on the bottom half of this page is show what the numbers are. So going left to right, we see all the races here in Wisconsin. I give on the left-hand side the number of single-dose vaccines to date, aggregated to date. That middle section tells you what the difference, how many new individuals have actually gotten vaccinated in the past week by each category. And just looking at that yellow highlighted section, you see on that top row, American Indians, the number as it goes right to left in the yellow box. You see from February 24th, there's only 776 individuals, then it went up to a peak on March 24th of 1,565, and then it started to decline in the number of natives being vaccinated in that week. Now, when you start looking at other populations, how does that compare to others? Well, the numbers are different because the population portions are different, but you also see this arcing of new vaccines given out, and you see that a rise and then then a decline, a rise and a decline for Asians, Blacks, Whites, Hispanics. It's all of the same. We don't all start and end at the same time, but it all occurs as time goes by. When we look at the far right, we see the rate of percent change in the past week. That's the right-handed table in the corner. I highlighted the time where the peak of demand in vaccinations for natives have occurred. That occurred on March 3rd. And every other race in the state also has a different week applied to their population as well. But as you see, this has been a decline that has been occurring for the past, 4 or 6 weeks, especially for natives. And so this is a little discouraging, because you would think, with all of the information out there, all of what we know about vaccines, how effective they are, you would think that individuals would get their eligibility to get the vaccine, that they would go and get it, and it's just not happening. And so as we look at the fully vaccinated population here in Wisconsin, we see that the native population is in a good position overall, but again, the trend, the peak of that fully vaccinated had occurred April 14th, and now we're seeing the downslide, and we'll continue to see the downslide with time. Now, if you think it's natives only, no, it's overall the general population of the state of Wisconsin. Because as you see here, we've vaccinated 4.3. Let me say that again. There's been 4.3 million doses administered, but when we look at the 7-day average of that breakout, we see that the week of April 28th, only 46,000 doses have been given out on the average every day. So that's on a downslide here in Wisconsin for the general population as a whole. So that's 2 solid weeks of the demand for the vaccine going down. And what's occurring here in Wisconsin is no different than what's occurring in the United States. Now, this, as of April 21, we already see that it's almost 2 solid weeks of a downslide, and it's not like a plateau and slowly, it is going down. And so what's occurring here in Wisconsin is occurring throughout the entire United States. 4.2% of individuals have been vaccinated with a single dose. That's going to translate, provided that every single person gets their second shot, to almost 43% of the country will be vaccinated. But on the far right side, I keep track of the averages as well. So we peaked 3 weeks ago in 2.9 million doses per day, to now close to 2.6. I suspect next week will be even lower. And my sense right now is this is not due to Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson does not have anything to do with this average. I know this kind of correlates with Johnson & Johnson, but believe me, if the demand was there, the supply of Pfizer and Moderna is there. Everywhere I talk to, everyone I communicate with about availability, everyone has availability. There's so many options right now. Anywhere where you go, the supply is there. It's the demand. And even if we did have Johnson & Johnson, it's not going to increase the demand at all. So the current administration is looking how to create incentive ways to get people vaccinated. I just don't know if that's going to be persuasive enough to get people to get vaccinated, even if you pay them. People are just, they're going to do what they want to do. So for IHS, so when we start looking at what's going on in Indian country, we see as of April 27th, we see the total number of aggregated tests done to date and the total positive COVID cases aggregated to date. We go to the next column and we see the change. The change is the number of new cases in the past week. Highlighted areas represent a change being an increase in the numbers. As you can see, not every week is different. Every region is different. Some are higher, some are lower. It really depends on the week of what's going on. So we see multiple areas that are changing now. And so the total number of new cases, new COVID cases, is now almost 1,100. Last week it was 940. So looking at the last month, just like the country, in Indian country, it has remained flat. We were 11 straight weeks of trending downwards. We took a bump up, and just like the rest of the country, has remained flat. No better, no worse, pretty much the same. And it is kind of the steady ebb and flow of COVID cases that are actively going on. So if we look more specifically at natives in the state of Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, going left to right, the 12 the tribes respectively with their total native population, the total new cases in parentheses, we see that here in the state of Wisconsin, pretty flat. Minnesota, maybe a slight downward as we're seeing as well in Michigan. The rate of infection by population of native population in Michigan, 6.9, Minnesota, 7.2. Wisconsin has remained in this mid-range 12% for a good 6 weeks now. So things have just kind of stuck. It's just not accelerating, it's not decreasing. We're just in this rut and not able to get out of it. I think I had mentioned this before. These two spikes, yellow spikes, are GLICs, are our agency's effort to vaccinate the Native community here in Milwaukee County. These two high spikes are a direct reflection of our effort here in Milwaukee. 34% of the Native population in Milwaukee County have now received at least one dose. And that is a good indicator that it is the Native population has been responsive, but perhaps not as responsive as we would like to see. But nonetheless, the Native community here in Milwaukee County has been extremely positive in getting that vaccine. In terms of what the trend here, the 7-day average is now 612. That is kind of slowly going downwards, perhaps not as fast as we'd all like to see. But if we look at comparing what this average is to what historically has been here in Wisconsin, we're looking at all the way back to July, nearly around July 4th as being the equivalent of what we're seeing now as to what we were seeing almost a year ago. So I wanted to show one more.
Maryland call security at 5015, please. Maryland call security at 5015.
Sorry about that. I want to show one more slide as to why. Nope, it didn't show up. Okay, sorry about that. Mark, I'm going to turn this back over to you because that slide did not show up. So.
Okay, All right, good to see you. All right, here comes our questions that I got over the last week or so with some social places. And some of the folks watch a show, one person, another person doesn't. So here we go. A person's got 2 vaccinations from your clinic. And so now we saw the graph on when they can wear the mask and when they cannot.
Mhm.
So there seems to be this idea that what do we assume when we see somebody who's not wearing a mask? Do we assume that
Mhm.
they've gotten their vaccinations, and if they have, great, and if they have not, even with 2 vaccinations, can that person still get COVID-19?
The quick answer is possible. Now, the reason why I bring that is that we hear these stories. It happens, it does occur. However, I will say it's not occurring very often. And when it does occur, it's called what we call a breakthrough infection. And what's interesting about that, at least here in the state of Wisconsin, so we have what, let's see, 32.4% of the population that's been fully vaccinated, almost 1.9 million people that have actually been, that are fully vaccinated to date. However, these breakthrough infections here in the state of Wisconsin, only 605 people have gotten COVID after being fully vaccinated. So just looking at the rate of that occurrence, there's a 0.03% of fully vaccinated people actually do get COVID, whereas 99.097 people who get fully vaccinated don't get COVID. So there's no question that not only is it effective in prevention, but also in transmission. And when we look at it from the US as a whole, and this was taken about a month ago, we're only like around, when we hit about 75 million people who've been fully vaccinated, there was only been 5,800 documented cases of people actually getting COVID after being fully vaccinated. That's hardly anything. That's like 0.0075% of people who get it. So the answer to your question is yes, you still can, but your chances are very, very, very small.
So this I had note to all our relatives out there, and I know you'll get it. There's another way of saying it. Let's say you're Oneida, you're a general tribal council, you got 700 tribal members in the room, and 699 of them got per capita.
Yeah.
So when the meeting opens up, the one person who didn't get the per cap, who are you going to hear from?
Yep.
And then word spreads throughout the entire chamber, and we spend about half hour, 45 minutes on why that person didn't get the per capita check without hearing from the people that had anything to do with sending a check out.
Yep.
So I'm glad you explained that.
Yeah.
And I'm here to put that in, kind of native language for everybody, just to make sure. So here's the next question. And this one's got a name for it after 57 weeks.
That'd be a doozy.
Yeah, this is from our good friend representing. I am for Mr. Andrew Connors of the Indian Council of the Elderly. So here you might want a pen, because here's all your factors to get into your scientific ratios. He's got a membership that's certain. They're signed up in general. They're 50 years and over. So that's one factor. He has the names. The organization knows, or they can ask their membership who's been vaccinated and who is not. What they had normally done before COVID gather, 2-3 times a week to have their meals inside a very large room over at the Potawatomi campus. Perhaps you've been in there. It used to be a large pool. You know the area, you know the name, you know the organization. As Joni Stromberg and Andrew Connor struggle with information, just kind of from your perspective and trying to help them, what do they want to be looking for when considering bringing that membership back to be checking in with them? And here's what's behind it. We know that there's a lot of anti-vaccination folks that are out there. They have their own groups. And usually psychologically, even when someone has bad information or false information, it's the first information they hear and they believe it. It's pretty rare that they're unconvinced. So it does take a lot of time. This is leading to my second question. So let's concentrate on the first. We have a known group of folks. We have people that probably need to be, this is like a community well check for our elders and fragile folks 50 and over. If you were Andy Connors or Joni Stromberg, what sort of particular numbers or what controls would you want to see before they bring back their in-person lunch encounters, which are usually kind of a net 2.5 to 3 hour variety? Or do you shorten it? So that's kind of, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, you can, but that's the question.
So, this is kind of interesting because I think every organization will go through this process. At what level do we feel comfortable in allowing gatherings to reconvene? And I'll tell you this. So I kind of gave the numbers as to these breakthrough infections and the rate at which that's really occurring. 1/100th, 1/1000th of a percentage point that this is occurring at, which just really goes back and really hits home how important being vaccinated is. Like I mentioned, not only does it prevent the infection, but also dramatically reduces the risk of transmitting the virus. So going back to the question is, how do you determine, or how do you figure or prioritize how you're going to reconvene? I know by our organization that we have almost, it's not absolute 100%, but we have almost that rate of people being vaccinated. Just by that statement alone, I have a very high confidence rate that the risk of transmitting the virus in this building is really low. It's really low. I think in let's say Indian Council of the Elderly, their rationale to approaching reconvening would really kind of be a head count and get a sense of who's been vaccinated, who hasn't, and those who haven't, is there something they can do to get them vaccinated if they want to? Now, indoor gatherings, are a bit restricted, but I guarantee you the individuals that were vaccinated and the use of a face covering, their risk of transmission, it's not zero, but it's really, really low. It's really low. And so I would gauge reconvening based on the rate of people immunized. You'll still need to practice the social distancing and maybe finding some capacity of space there. But I think it would give people peace of mind knowing that if you are in a setting with a bunch of other individuals that are also vaccinated while still practicing safe distance and mask wearing when appropriate, I think that should give people greater confidence that on a limited capacity, they could reconvene. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, just as administrators, the things that they want to look for, I would imagine is, you want to be checking in with those that you're serving.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have some kind of questionnaire that says, are you vaccinated? Are you not? So maybe other precautions can be taken for those who choose not to be, or some kind of note that they can read at hand in big type. We're talking about older people.
Yeah.
That if you haven't been vaccinated, here's some extra cautions that you can take while we're gathering. That's the kind of thing. It's a thoughtful sort of question, and again, not putting you on the spot, but
Mm-hmm.
this is the kind of question that's in our community now.
Oh yeah.
In seeking information for, and perhaps a more detailed conversation with the leadership and board at Indian Council of the Elderly's in order fairly soon with you or staff members.
Just so you know, my answer is my flat answer out is not to do anything or not reconvene, because I think there is something to say now that we know that vaccines have taken a greater portion of people have been vaccinated. I think it changes the dialogue to what can we do in those limitations as to what we can versus no, we can't do anything because COVID. Well, yeah, I that would not be my answer anymore.
So one of the, and this went to a different organization in Menominee, which was, what if we went from indoor and went to a company that rents the larger tents with the walls on it as a place to convene? Would that be a better option than indoors for, I don't know, the going into summer?
Yeah. So my answer would be anything outdoors is a heck of a lot better than indoors, and perhaps even the ability to increase your capacity outdoors, even though proximity may not be an issue, but because it is outdoors and the flow of air, your risk dramatically goes down from indoor to outdoor. Just automatically it does.
Okay.
And so your better option is an outdoor event.
Jeremiah, we got a question here, and I want to get to that. We try to close our programs out at about that hour mark, but we want to get to it. I apologize, I didn't see it till right now. So want to give you a little airtime to ease you back into your job. That's very important in bringing us this information. Thank you for that screen. So Jeremiah, if you can take this question.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I just wanted to mention that, I think I've been reading some articles and there's been some stories and anecdotal things here and there. Just a growing tendency of people not returning to receive their second dose. And I just wanted to know, what have you been hearing around this? Hesitancy, is it purely due to fear of side effects, or, are they fine with the impact of that just one dose provides? Is there, you mentioned the J&J impact maybe on hesitancy. Is that having an impact? I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm sure it's a mixed bag. I think the individuals that didn't return for their second one were extremely reluctant to even get their first shot. So I suppose if we, we hosted 2 events, and I'd say the vast majority returned. Just a handful or 2 would not show up for their second one. Either they just flat out said no, or used transportation as an excuse, and some just didn't bother. So there's kind of a spectrum of reasons why, but I think the individuals that didn't show were reluctant to even show up in the first place and got it out of spite, maybe family pressure, and just maybe they did have bad side effects and didn't want to get it the second time. So But I will say, not a whole lot of individuals skipped, at least in our events, their second dose. So I felt pretty good about that.
So what would your message be just to those people, on the importance to make sure they do come back and, go to wherever they got that first dose to re-up, I guess, and get that second dose?
So the location that you may have gotten that dose, if it's like a controlled setting, like let's say our clinic, we get allocated doses, and if a person was to get a shot, there'd be a guaranteed second shot. But when individuals don't show up for the second shot, we don't let those go to waste, but we have to coordinate, and this is a lot of coordination to get that second shot paired up with all of the vials. So, the vials require, if you open one vial, you got to use the whole bottle. And so just a lot of coordination. But for people who've actually missed their second shot, it's still not too late to get your second shot. It may not be from your original location where you got it, because now there are options everywhere where you can get the shot. So if you missed it, or if you were hesitant about getting the second shot because of side effects, or what you're hearing in the news, you could still go to, some of these major locations, the Wisconsin Center, or a pharmacy, even if it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, just get your second shot, just complete the process, and you'll be better off.
Dr. Ignace, that's going to lead to my last question, and we're going to save that question for next time, but I want to ask it so you have some time to prepare.
Cliffhanger.
Folks at the center. So, and that question is, so I have that uncle or aunt anti-vaxxer in front of me. Their health is important to me. I know that their health is important to them as well, and they're wanting to be that way. It's just that denial piece is tough to get through. And what we'd like to know, and I've been asked a couple times now, is like, what's that kind of immunization strategy conversation look like, right? And again, not looking right now, in one tip that I know that works for me is when I get kids on the field that don't want to do certain things, when I'm coaching, I'll often say, and it's unique, I think, to a lot of Native kids, not everyone, but a lot, is you need to know this for your little brother, or you're going to be mentoring another player coming up, and you need to know what I'm sharing with you in order for you to teach that to someone else. And usually I get a lot more cooperation with that idea that there's a social good, there's some inspiration, that they're going to be in control of something that they didn't think they could be, and also they're helping someone. But if I say have that conversation in front of their parents, I go from kind of a 80% cooperation to 100% cooperation, because they have someone that's there that they know, and that's participating in that discussion and decision of what to do and not do. Sometimes when I get someone alone or a kid alone, it's easier for them to push back than if they're in the presence of someone that loves them, cares for them, and wants to help them.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing is what I'm going to be looking for next time, because we might lead that show off and tease it a little bit of what do I do with Uncle Anti-Vaccinator or Anti-Vaccinator, however we can put that to your marketing department, that would be awesome, because there is now that plateau, and we need to pierce that plateau, and we can't give up. So Dr. Ignace, you have the last words, and thank you for the extra time today, going past our hour.
Yeah, not a problem. And so, yeah, that's I think that's going to be the $1 million question, and I think I'll be able to maybe get to that, maybe to the core of how do we change that moving forward next week. But so right now, I think Wisconsin, and I think for most Native communities, they are in a good spot. They're better off now than they were, November time, without a doubt. But what we're seeing, the trends aren't changing at all. In a good 3 weeks now, things have not changed and they've remained flat. And when you start looking at that kind of trend of infection versus the rate of people wanting or people getting vaccine, you see there's a correlation between how this virus is hanging around and the rate of current immunizations. And so that correlation, that negative correlation, is going to allow this virus to hang around. Now, we know it's effective. At the same time, we also know that people can still get COVID. But there's a couple things you can look at as maybe convincing yourself to do it. Would you rather get COVID or have minimal side effects from the vaccine? I chose to have the minimal side effects to the vaccine, knowing that my risk of not only getting it or even transmitting were dramatically improved. I'd rather get the side effects to the vaccine for a day or two versus 2 weeks of COVID symptoms and whatever that may lead. And so there is always hope of trending this downwards. It's not going to go away by itself overnight. This is where collectively Native communities across the country are going to need to pull together and determine how they want to address this. And we know we have the tools and the vaccines to do it. So please get your vaccine. And we will be talking about more topics coming up, and that hesitancy and how we can get people to step over that line and get vaccinated. So until next time, everyone, stay strong.